Alright, this is the mostly assembled gear train removed out of the case. Pump's not on there. And then the output gear is not on there. That goes right here. It's a beast to get out of the case, so I didn't pull it out for this. So you've got input shaft, your high-low clutch drum assembly. These are driving clutches, so when these are engaged, they're actually sending power through the transmission. The input shaft also does it, but it only does that in reverse, where it's the only thing powering it. Otherwise, these clutches are also sending power too. These are the low reverse clutches. That's the one-way clutch, sprag, low diode, whatever you want to call it. This is the 2.6 clutch set, and this is the reverse 3.5 clutch set. This is the input clutch drum assembly. It has the high and low clutches inside here. Input shaft here. This hooks to the converter, splines in there, so whenever this converter spins, this also spins because it's splined in here. On this side, we have the output side of the drum goes to the front planet. The inner one goes to the rear planet. This is the rear of the input shaft. It splines into the reduction planet in the rear. So we can open this up a little bit. Let's pop the input shaft out here. I've already pulled the snap ring out of here. These are the low clutches. There's 5 of them. These are the high clutches. Also 5 of them. What happens is there's pistons inside this drum that actuate the clutches. So for 4th, 5th, and 6th gear, these clutches, there's also a plate that goes here that I've already pulled off, apply against this. That transmits the power through this shaft. And 1st through 4th, it's these clutches. To make 4th gear, which is direct gear, which I'll show a little bit later, the actual power flow, both of these clutches are engaged, and so it spins the planetaries as an entire unit. This is where the input shaft splines here. I can pull these clutches out and kind of show you. This is the piston that pushes up here. This is the piston that pushes on those. Clutches themselves are actually a different material. You can see the metallic in this, right here there's metallic in this clutch set. Here it's more of a traditional cork. This is the low reverse set. 5 frictions. See a little bit there. Double-sided. These steels spline into the case. So when the pressure is applied to this clutch set, it's a brake clutch. So these notches spline against the case, pressure pushes against that, and it brings this planet to a stop. These clutches are only used in 1st gear and reverse. Alright, this is the one-way clutch, or the sprag as it's sometimes called. Its purpose is to allow movement in only one direction. So we turn it that way, it doesn't turn at all. Allows it to turn that way. These notches spline into the front planet. Their job is to keep the front planet from rotating a certain way, so it can only turn one way. On the back, It also serves as the backing plate for the low reverse clutches. So they stack up on it right there. Steel clutch, just like that. This is the 2.6 clutch set, sitting where they are. You got 5 clutches here. Slide down there, again they break a planet. And this is going to be very hard to do with one hand, so sits down in there like that. These stop the rotation of the outside of this planet. This is the reverse 3.5 clutch set. It's actually the back of the transmission cover. It provides the support for these clutches and then the 2.6 brake clutches. Where they're brake clutches, their job is to stop rotation. So in the reverse 3.5 set, there are 4 clutches. This actually is the reason this transmission was pulled out. It's because you can see it was slipping. Those are burn marks on the steel. So this thing was slipping in reverse, had to come out. I believe the history on the transmission was they just put a used one in it. This is a core that I got from somewhere. So what it does are these steels. You can see they have an interference fit right here. And you can see a little bit where they rub. This is the 2.6 have been rubbing a little bit. You can't actually feel it, you can just see it. Those stop, clutch pressure gets applied to this right here, and then it stops the reduction planet. So they normally rotate with like that. Pressure gets applied, stops. All right, this is the planetaries, with the clutches and the input shaft here. You can kind of see you've got movement when you're driving power into it. So Mazda labels these a little confusing. This is the front planet. They call the middle one the rear planet, and then the bottom is the reduction planet. Where it gets a little interesting, I'm gonna have to pull it apart to kind of show you. So get the input shaft out, get both the back of the high-low drum clutch sets out. So if we pull front planet out, it's got some pretty good sized pinions in it. This is one of the parts that differentiates the turbo version from the regular gas engine. There's 4 pinions in this planet. The next planet and the bottom has 5. In the smaller version, there's 3 pinions in all of the planets. What this does, when you think of a transmission or any sort of gear that transfers power, it can only transfer the power on the parts that are touching. So the power is only being sent through these little teeth in this ring gear here. You have 4 pinions, you have more pinions, that's more contact point for more power, and also these are bigger pinions here. We'll go into that when I tear down the other smaller one I've got, and we'll do a direct comparison between everything. But Mazda didn't cheap out in this transmission, and that's one of the reasons why they're so robust. Yeah, you'll have failures. That's with anything. Very, very uncommon though. This is the rear planet. I'll pull it out there. The ring gear for the front planet is part of it. You can press them apart, but there's really no reason to. So we have another planet here. Sun gear fell out, but another decently sized pinions inside there. And you can see the sun gear there. So how this works for these to be driven. Start with, this is the rear planet also. It's a 5-pinion design. The sun gear will pull it out. There's a thrust bearing there. So there are smaller, but they are definitely not the smallest that we have run across in transmissions. So how this works power-wise, let's set this up here. So the high clutch hub, it'll be easier to do it this way. Splines in here. So the high clutch, as it's turning, or not turning as the case may be, splines right there. So it's grabbing that part of that planet, but it also grabs the sun gear in the rear planet. So that front clutch, the low clutch, is able to drive 2 planets at once. The low or the high clutch drum also splines into this planet. So it also has the ability to drive that. I've got the output in the input marked, so you'll be able to watch it as it goes around. For first gear, it's a ratio of around 3.5 depending on which version of the transmission it is. They're both very close. So what happens for first gear, input clutch here is driven by the engine. That's the output here. Low reverse clutches and the one-way clutch hold the front planet from moving. So you'll be able to watch this make about 3.5 turns for this one to make 1 turn. One, 2, 3.5. So for second gear, again, this clutch is driven. The clutches here are released. And then the clutches here, this is called the rear planet, even though it's in the middle. They're applied so it stops this planet from moving. This makes second gear. So 1, 2, all right, so for third gear, this is the driven clutch still. Both these clutches are released. Now it's going to be a little bit hard for me to do this one because I have to be able to turn the input shaft at the same time. It's important to remember the input shaft is turning all the time, but in third gear, it's also transmitting the power because it's sleeved directly into the bottom planet. So I'll have to turn this and this without turning the inner clutch and holding this at the same time. Ratio is about 1.5 on most of them. So 1.5. Okay, to make fourth gear, it's easy. It's a 1-to-1 ratio. It's called direct. These 3 clutches are released here. The low clutch is engaged, but now the inner high clutch is also engaged. So both of these are transmitting power in fourth gear. So this whole unit is going to turn at a ratio of 1-to-1. Just like that. Now to show the overdrive gears, I've removed the low clutch because it'll cover this up. You won't be able to see the reduction, and the low clutch is not used at all to make overdrive. So for 5th gear, this is the input clutch. Input shaft is turning, and then the brake clutches down here are grabbing the lower planet. So this is our first overdrive ratio. So what you'll see here that's different from the other ones is this one, the output gear, will now make complete turns before the input will. And again, I gotta hold the input shaft on this one too. So now there's a complete turn of the output, and now the input turn. So 6th gear will be a little easier because I don't have to turn the input at the same time, even though it is still driving the bottom. Just the input clutch is on, and then the 2/6 middle clutch is on. One turn of that, one of the input. So at speed, what that looks like, let's line these back up here. Alright, so now I'm going to show how reverse is made. I've pulled the high and low clutches out because they're not used in reverse. The input shaft is just driving the reduction planet. The low reverse brake clutches are applied, and then the reverse 3/5 clutches are applied. The gear ratio for reverse is 3.8 to 3.9 depending on the trans. So you'll be able to watch these two shafts, instead of spinning the same, will now spin opposite of each other. There's a rotation in reverse. Alright, this is the middle case half. Bell housing bolts on the top. This is the gear I was talking about earlier that the output part of the planetaries slides into. So when that turns the secondary gear, which then drives the differential. So to get the final drive ratio calculated on a Skyactiv automatic, you have to take into account the teeth here on the diff itself, and then right here is the pinion. So you got the pinion and the ring gear, which are a ratio, and then those are a ratio. You have to do a combination of math on those to get what your actual drive ratio is in a Skyactiv. But as you can see, that's how the power transfer works. This differential itself that's in these is actually pretty heavy duty. But here, so it's also is the park mechanism is on the back of this gear. This is the linkage that comes from the outside of the transmission in. Now let's put it in park. Now it's in park. That comes down, locks it. So when you're in park, that's why your car doesn't move. Now on the differential itself, the big difference between the all-wheel drive and the front-wheel drive versions, this is a front-wheel drive version, the all-wheel drive version on this side has a nub that comes up to about here. It's splined on the inside, and the transfer case splines over that. So the axle runs through here, hooks to this spider gear here. Other axle goes in here. Every time this operates as a unit, it's sending power through the transfer case. The gears, the way these are built, can turn independently of the rear.